Well, welcome to the October General Membership Meeting of the Utah Apartment Association, October 2014. We have some really good topics tonight and some excellent speakers. And we also have some treats in the back. If you notice, there's some cupcakes and some chocolate and some Halloween treats back there. And that's provided by a sponsor, Susan Gray with ServPro. She's going to come up for a minute and talk a little bit about what ServPro does. After she comes up, we're going to have Candace with American Family Insurance. She's one of the smartest people. You're going to love her. She gives a great presentation. She's going to talk about emergency preparedness and preparing for things like floods and fires. How do you make the claim when they happen? How do you calm down the relationship with the tenant? All those great things. And then our own Taylor Smith from the UAA staff is going to talk about inspections, and he's also going to go through all of the UAA forms. And it's very interactive tonight. We hope you'll ask a lot of questions. And thanks for coming. Susan, come on up.
Thanks. Okay, so I'll just take a minute of your time tonight. ServPro, we're a restoration company. So we do fire, water restoration. So if you're a apartment owner or homeowner, or you own multiple units, we can work with you. The biggest thing that we would advise you guys on as, property managers is that you mitigate your flood quickly, because that will lessen the damage. So call us and we can come out. We have a 148, what we call a 148 response time. So that means within the first hour, we will call you back. And I've given you guys all my card. If you can, my cell phone is on this. You can call me at 3 in the morning. I don't care. It's business for me. So you can call me at 3 in the morning. Or you can call the business line, and that is answered 24/7. And that will get you to a person who then contacts the owner directly. And the owner will call you back within an hour. I can promise you that it's usually within 5 to 10 minutes. So we are very, very quick, and that's one of the best things about ServPro is if you've got a water loss or you've got water damage, you want to get it taken care of as quickly as possible so that you don't get mold. We've got a semi, we're a large loss. So our franchise is out of West Jordan, South Jordan. We cover the whole state. We also own the St. George franchise, and we will go anywhere in the state. So we've done Brigham City, Logan, we go down to St. George, all the time. We've got an office in St. George. So wherever you own properties, we can help you. As far as pricing goes, we are willing to work with you. So if you are interested in finding out, we also do carpet cleaning, duct cleaning. So for your properties, if you're into renovations, things like that, we're happy to work with you on that. This is something we also want to work with you. So if you we'll do what you ask us to. So if you say, I want this part done, I don't want this part done, we will work with you on that. So just keep that in mind. If you are not going through insurance, we will work with you on pricing. If you would like to talk to us, I've been starting to work with lots of different property managers. And we're sitting down with him and we're sitting down with the property owner. I got a guy who owns like 3,100 units, and we sat down with him and we worked out some pricing for him. So we're happy to do that. If you don't want to be blindsided, if something does happen and you're concerned about that, please give us a call so that we can prepare, so that when the time comes and you do have a water loss, we can work with you. So I think I covered it all. Are there any questions from anybody? Okay, please feel free to call me, and I appreciate your time tonight. Thanks so much. I'll be around for the night. Anybody who didn't get my card, they're on the back of the table there.
And the cookies too.
And the cookies.
I should put it.
Oh, can we just do this?
Yep.
my name is Candace Meyer with the Candace Meyer Insurance Agency of American Family Insurance, and thanks for having me. I've kind of prepared the whole presentation around, fire, wildfire, the big floods, the big earthquakes, but as I was driving over here, I'm thinking, first of all, I can't believe it's already almost November, but I started thinking about really the risks for property owners and landlords. And this time of year, that really does change a lot. It's not just the earthquake, the big earthquake that we keep talking about we're gonna have, but really, tomorrow's Halloween. People do dumb stuff on Halloween. And then we roll into November, and pretty soon we've got people thinking it's a good idea to gather family and friends, get them all in the backyard, get these big vats of really, really hot grease, fill it to the top, throw in the frozen turkeys, and kind of see what happens. So we've got that coming up, and then obviously we've got Christmas with the tree lights and fireplaces and all the space heaters and all the different things that we do to entertain, to decorate, but also to keep warm during the winter. We've got the ice dams coming up. We've got the scare of roof collapse with all the heavy snow, things like that. So there really is a lot more to think about as a property owner than just the big stuff. So my job is really to help you prepare insurance-wise. That's obviously one of the best ways that you can do some advanced planning to make sure when these things happen that you are covered, that we can get that property restored for you, that ServPro can jump in and help get things squared away. So we'll talk really tonight about just some things that you can do advanced planning insurance-wise that may help you out in the long run. Because as a reality, as a landlord, you really do kind of lose control over that asset when that tenant is in there. We don't know if they're bringing a pit bull in. We don't know really what they are doing over the holidays. We don't know if they're caring for it the same way that we would day after day after day. So we want to help you prepare for that. Taylor?
I don't start.
Just open the hole. Thank you.
Modern technology.
I never can figure it out.
I can.
So some of the things to consider when planning for emergencies and disasters, some of the questions that should be going through your mind are: what assets and property are you trying to protect? What does that look like? What are those values? What is that income? What is it that we're trying to protect? How can you ensure your property is restored as soon as possible and you don't lose your rental income that obviously you've worked so hard to achieve? How can you maintain quality care for your tenants? I'm sure all of you care about the people that are residing in those homes, so what can you do to help them either before the loss or after a loss? And then what are your biggest risks? Is it earthquake? Is it wind? Is it fire? Is it silly things that your tenants do? What do you think those biggest risks for you as a property owner and your specific homes and or apartments and where those reside? So obviously I already mentioned this. One of the things that you can do is really transferring a lot of that risk, a lot of that worry over to a proper insurance portfolio and insurance plan. And these are some of the things. And if you've been here before when I've talked, I really have talked about most of this before. These are the things that I see as I'm comparing insurance policies. The things that maybe there's gaps in, that maybe we're either underinsured or overinsured. So we'll talk about what you can do when you're talking to your agent, or if you don't meet with your agent, that would be step one. So the building coverage. It's really important to know, especially if you've had your properties for a long time, especially if they're older buildings, or if they're vacant. Important to know, do you have replacement costs on those structures, or is it depreciated value? And that's something that your agent can advise you. It's usually on your declaration page, but just call your agent, that's easier. Do you have co-insurance? Does anybody know what co-insurance is on an insurance policy? Anybody ever had to deal with that in a claim? Okay, so co-insurance says most insurance policies, when it comes to property, they have an 80% co-insurance clause. It's pretty standard. And what that means is if you're not insuring that building up to at least 80% of what its true replacement cost is, they can penalize you at the time of a loss, no matter if it's a partial loss or a total loss. So if it's worth $100,000, or excuse me, not the worth, if the replacement cost is $100,000, you better be insuring it for at least $80,000 if you have an 80% co-insurance clause. If you've got a 90% co-insurance clause, it needs to be insured at $90,000. And again, you don't need to memorize that, but that would be a word that I would bring up to your insurance agent. Do I have a co-insurance clause? Yeah.
Renter's insurance, do you require renters to have rent insurance? Would that cover the co-insurance?
It would not. It would not. That's a great question. The question was if my renter has their own insurance, would that cover my co-insurance? And the co-insurance isn't really, it's not what you're used to with health insurance. It's not a deductible, it's a penalty. It's if you're not insuring it for enough, then the insurance company doesn't like that. They want to be able to replace you, make you whole again, but also it's a way of them helping make sure that they're profitable too, is that we're insuring things to the proper value. So ask about the co-insurance. I had a condo association, live story, when we had the big wins in 2011. It was a $23 million condo association, and they were not, I took the policy 3 days after, I didn't have the big claim, but the policy that was written before it was underinsured, and they were faced with a $600,000 penalty that they had to come up with on their own. The insurance wasn't going to cover because they were underinsuring the property. So just something to be aware of, especially when you've owned those properties for a long time. Those building costs can creep up on you, even if you've got an inflation cost factor on that policy. And then building limits, this is one that oftentimes it's really overlooked in terms of how much should I insure that property for? Sometimes we use the sales price, sometimes we use the appraised value, sometimes we use the county assessor's page, sometimes we use just whatever you tell us we should put in there. And really, your agent should be doing a replacement cost calculation for you. But the bottom line is if there's a claim, who do you think is responsible for making sure that's insured properly? You are. You are. The insurance company typically isn't going to take that on as their fault, their liability. You're the property owner, so take some initiative in that and talk with your agent about that. Ask them where they came up with that number, or if you came up with it, ask them if they can review it with you.
Whom should I believe, my agent or insurance company if something happened? And insurance company said, okay, the replacement cost is $200,000. And my agent said it's $150,000.
You might. I mean, you would certainly go back to them and say, look, the agent advised me on this. We have errors and omissions coverage as agents. So certainly you could. But if it was
determine this amount?
How do we determine it?
Yeah,
So as,
the insurance company somehow might determine, and I know I spoke to a lot of contractors, and they say, okay, this building, it's just for there, it's $100,000 to build. And insurance company says $200 replacement cost. How can I fight with this?
well, most companies will have a cost to rebuild calculator. So we use in a company called Exactware, and we enter in all the building details, but that calculation is only as good as the information that we have. So as long as we've got enormous amount of detail from you in terms of the flooring, the exact square footage, the number of bedrooms, the number of bathrooms, the attachments, the patios, those types of things, if we've got good information, it's never going to be 100% accurate. That's why they give that 20% cushion. But you do want to try to get that as close as possible, and your agent has a calculator for that. Any other questions on the building limits, building coverage? Okay. And then loss of rents, does anybody know if they have business income, loss of rents on their properties? Pretty much everybody knows? Okay. If you don't, if you're not sure, again, just another question to ask your agent. How often do you meet with your agents? How often are you guys talking about the insurance? Because it's fun.
When something goes
Really
wrong.
is fun. Yeah, when something goes wrong, that's pretty common. That's pretty common. I would recommend, depending on the size of your portfolio, if your portfolio is very large, I would recommend a minimum of yearly. If you're buying and selling properties often, I would recommend quarterly. And the reason being, you could forget. You could forget to tell them about a property, especially if you paid cash for it. They could forget to remove a property that you sold 6 months ago. It's just good business planning to make sure that if your portfolio is large enough that you're meeting more regularly. If you've got a couple of properties, then annual is probably fine, and some people may go 2 or 3 years before they meet. But definitely don't wait 10 years, 15 years. Try to meet with that agent more often if you can. So the loss of rents is basically just saying if something happens to that property and it's a covered loss, like wind, hail, lightning, then we are going to replace that income that you're losing while it's being rebuilt. So not only will we repair and replace it for you, but we're also going to pay for that lost income. And documentation is really important on that. So make sure that you do keep good records. Make sure that you're backing up your records, backing those up off-site, because maybe your place of business is damaged. But they will ask for documentation, because that's how they'll base their payments to you, is what your rents were previously. Okay? And then understanding your exclusions and options. Everyone in this room is probably aware that the big exclusions in your policies are earthquake, flood, sewer backup. They're not covered. Unless you specifically pay an additional premium for them, you do not have that on your policy. Okay? And less than 10% of policies in Utah, property policies in Utah, have earthquake. Just something to consider. I'm not saying you have to have it, or maybe you should have it, but it's something to just make sure you ask the question, what would it cost to put it on there, so you can make a good business decision on whether or not that makes sense. Does anybody in here carry earthquake on some or the majority of their properties? A couple of you? Okay. Just a great question to ask. Sometimes it's not as expensive as you think it is.
Well, you can add, what I did was I added earthquake and then bumped up my deductibles.
Sure.
So it wasn't as expensive. I'm not going to make a $1,000 claim anyway.
Right, exactly. And that's
So
that's a great way to add coverage to your policy, is to either take things away you don't need or increase your deductibles.
Would you clarify in case of earthquake, if it's happened, and then let's say dirt moves and it's not damage your house, but the piping, let's say gas piping, is causing that problem, and then it's fire?
Fire's a covered loss. So if there's an earthquake, run downstairs and light the match. But I didn't say that. And there's matches in the back, thanks to Servbrook. Those are not thanks to American Family.
I would disagree with that, because in Hurricane Katrina, they wouldn't cover because they said the cause was the natural disaster. So as I understand it, if it's a fire loss, but it was caused by the earthquake, they won't cover you.
No, well, that's not my understanding. I've talked to my property claims manager about that, because I have
That's
that.
what my insurance guy told me as well.
I will double check and I will get back with Paul, but I've been told that if it's, as long as it's a covered loss, even if it's the earthquake that caused it, the fire would be covered, because it's a fire. But I'll verify for you.
So
It's
take the
great.
strap off the water heater so that it can't
No,
grease
keep
the
the
pipe.
strap on. Keep the strap on.
Just get earthquake insurance and you'll be covered.
They only announced the earthquake.
But earth movement in general, no earth movement is covered. So if it's just settling, cracking, bulging, anything like that, patios, decks, never covered. And you can't add it. So, the settling stuff. And then landslide, obviously we had the huge news in Bountiful, or North Salt Lake with the landslide. That's not covered in your policy. And then sewer. So all of those things are additional premiums. There is a, Lloyd's of London does just a broad disaster plan that you can purchase, and you can either purchase just the flood, the landslide, and the earthquake. You can kind of combine those different things depending on if your property's on a hillside or what you think the cause of loss might be. So they do that. That is an option. So determine the highest risk for your particular locations, and then see what it's going to cost to add some of those additional coverages. This one is my one I usually talk about a lot, Rich, is the liability on policies. So for landlord policies, the liability portion is so cheap. So this is something that protects you from a lot of the stupid. The tenant that brings the pit bull that didn't tell you they had the pit bull. Who's going to pay for that reconstructive surgery when they bring the pit bull on the property and they didn't tell you? You are, likely. Even if your tenant had insurance, they're likely going to suck you into that claim too. So that is the least expensive piece of your policy. So when we talk about disaster preparation and planning, granted this isn't going to cover your building in the event of an earthquake, but when somebody does something silly on your property and somebody gets hurt, or maybe somebody's been asking for smoke detectors or to change batteries or to come fix something and it never got done and a fire did start and somebody died, somebody was seriously injured, this can help with that protection. And it's cheap. Most policies you can put, I see a lot of them at $100,000, which is just crazy. Most of your properties are worth more than that. They will very likely sue and win for more than $100,000. So you can raise that to usually $2 million per occurrence and $4 million aggregate. And the difference on I just know my policy, but it's $9 a year on most single family rental dwellings. And even on large apartment complexes, it's not much. So ask your agent, what would it take to increase my limits to the max you offer? Some might only offer 1 mil, 2 mil, but if they'll do 2 mil, 4, do it. And then you can decide based on your portfolio, should I have an umbrella on top of that? Okay. Makes sense? Questions on liability? Okay, approved. So one of the other things I recommend when you're planning for emergencies, planning for disasters, trying to mitigate things is get your tenants involved. If you can, if you feel it's appropriate, something to consider. I don't know how many of you, does anybody in here show them when you do your initial check-in where the gas, water, shut off, those types of things are? A couple. Something to consider. You can get little water shut-off tags with your contact information in them. Walk them through it, go post it on there while they're standing there with you. And then when you do your annual reviews, your annual check-ins, or quarterly, or however often you do those are some of the things that you could put on your checklist to review with them, because they could help mitigate that. Shut the gas off when there's an earthquake so that we don't have the fires. Fire extinguishers and smoke detectors. Does anybody supply those for the tenants, or is that something that's pretty much on their own? You supply them? Do you change the batteries then for them too? No? Okay, so that might be something maybe doing on your walkthroughs to check. Hey, I'm here to change the batteries. So fire extinguishers and smoke detectors, those are just some ways that you can get your tenants involved, making sure that that is in the property. And then renter's insurance. Does anybody mandate renter's insurance for their tenants? I know a couple of you asked about it or mentioned that. Okay. That is something I do recommend for a couple of reasons. Number one, if they cause the stupid, if they are the one out in the backyard barbecuing that turkey and they fill the oil too high and then threw the frozen turkey in, if they cause smoke damage, fire, or explosion in your property, and whether they damage neighbors or your structure, your policy then can subrogate back after them so that it's not a chargeable loss. And obviously all of you are trying to keep your premiums down. So if they've got insurance for those 3 losses, usually you can subrogate back against them.
How much it cost?
For renter's insurance, $10 to $15 a month. Pretty inexpensive. You can set up with, there's companies that you can set up with where when they come, I don't know a lot about them, but when you sign them up as a tenant, you can say, okay, do you have your own renter's insurance? And if they say no, great, here you go. And you can actually, if you sign up with a company, you can have it done for them right then. The other thing is ask to be an additional insured. So if you're going to mandate renter's insurance, ask to be an additional insured on their policy, because what that means is you will get a notification if their policy lapses. You will get told so that they don't just pay that first month to say, okay, I got my renter's insurance, let me in, and then they'll let it cancel the next week. So you'll be notified then if that policy ever lapses. So add them as an additional insured, like yourself.
The renter's insurance, I mandated, it's really inexpensive. I put minimum limits on the liability because the $300,000 liability is about 50 cents a month more than $100,000 liability. And so I set that as my minimum. So there's $300,000 covered before I even have to look at anything. And I haven't seen any of my tenants with more than about $12 a month bill so far, maybe 13.
What insurance?
They all just wherever they have their insurance, wherever they've got their car insurance. If they don't have somebody, I'll recommend them to
They
the place.
bring you the car from clear insurance?
Yeah, they have to show me that it's insured, and like she says, I become an additional insured on there, and I will not give them keys to the place until that's done.
So you don't have this rule if they lapse, so they notify?
If they lapse, the company will let me know they lapse, and I'll pay it, and then I'll enforce it. According to their contract, they have to
So
carry
all the
insurance.
insurance companies have the same rule?
Well, they all understand our industry, and when you say you want to be an additional insured, they know what
So
you
the
want.
tenant's supposed to put you as an additional insured?
Right.
Right, they'll tell your insurance agent that they want that, and then you just simply ask them for a certificate, and the agent will know what you need. Yeah. So good. Multiple contact methods, just a reminder, obviously. that they have a few different ways to get a hold of you in the event of an emergency, so that or that you have guidelines spelled out who you want them to call. Do you have a specific disaster company? When there's a flood, can they just go ahead and call ServPro and get them out there? So that is something that you can consider. And then obviously doing some inspections to identify hazards. This is really important to protect your own insurability, because insurance companies obviously are protecting their bottom line, and so they'll go out and do surveys on their properties to check for roof conditions, but they're also checking for trampolines that maybe aren't fenced, or swimming pools in the backyards that get put up that maybe don't have fences around them, or debris. We get people that will have debris everywhere in their yards, and that can be a hazard for somebody to trip and fall, somebody to get hurt, especially children. Refrigerators that are sitting out on the front that aren't locked, that a child could lock themselves into playing hide and seek. They'll look for some of those things. So look for those hazards too as you're doing your inspections that are outside that could cause injury or harm to somebody else, because that could impact your own policy. And these are just some additional things. Sorry, I need to get going. Have your insurance paperwork organized. So if a disaster does happen, and especially if it's a large one, and it's impacting more than one of your units. I met with somebody the other day, and they had about 30 properties, and I was helping them do comparisons. And I had all my comparisons done, my dwelling coverage, and what I was going to do. And I said, okay, let me help you compare this with your current company so we know if it's a good value. So we were digging through boxes after boxes after boxes, trying to find the declaration pages so I could help them compare. So imagine at the time of a loss, trying to find, okay, who's the insurance agent, who's the company, who do I call, what's my deductible? And if you want, I have spreadsheets that I use for that for my clients. I'm happy to share them with you. That details out that information that you can then go over with your own agent. Have insurance contacts readily available. Hopefully you have this on your cell phone. Preferred vendors, ServPro. Was it Karen? Sorry. Oh, Susan. Sorry. Susan mentioned actually preparing in advance and getting bids from those vendors on what they're going to charge you to just go out and look at it, or what they're going to charge you per hour. That's actually really important. When it's a major catastrophe here in Utah, if an earthquake does strike, those vendors are going to be scarce. So if you've got somebody and you're already top on their list and you keep in touch with them, they're a lot more likely to go visit you and get your properties taken care of. So I would have 3 or 4 vendors that you work with on a regular basis, keep in contact with, have their numbers ready. So when something disastrous does happen, you've got contractors. And then you're also not quite as subject to all the fraud and everything that happens with contractors coming in and trying to scam. So have that prepared. Utilities contacts, make sure that you've got those set aside. Your backup documentation, property photos showing the condition before the loss. Just having backup for stuff, because the disaster could happen in your home or your office or wherever you're keeping all this data. So make sure that you're actually protecting your own business as well. And then just budgeting for your deductibles and your exclusions, earthquake deductibles, things like that. Do you have enough in reserves? If you've decided that you're not going to carry earthquake insurance, are you budgeting for that? Do you know what that's going to look like for you if an earthquake does happen and you lose a property or 2 properties that are not covered by earthquake? Something to consider. And there's a million resources out there on the web. Your agent obviously should be the first one that you say, hey, can we meet and go over this? I want to see what I've got. Walk me through what I'm missing. What do you think I should do? What are my building coverages? And then if you want to look at disaster ready, be ready, like for earthquakes and things, there's disastersafety.org, there's bereadyutah.gov, FEMA.gov, and there's even apps. If you're using the iPhones and the iPads, there's apps with all those checklists on them on what you should be doing for earthquake, flood, wind, all those types of losses. Any questions? Sorry, that was a lot of information. Okay, well, thank you very much.
If you have questions later, you can come up and ask Candace, or I'm sure she has her contact information on here, and we will be posting it on the website as well. So.
Okay.
All right, everybody, thank you so much again for coming. I am handing out right now a invitation to next month's meeting. As you know, we have these general membership meetings every month, January through October. In November, we have a giant meeting, which is stipulated by our bylaws in order to elect our board of directors and to have some other opportunities there. This year is our 80th anniversary. So since it's our 80th anniversary, we decided to make it a big party and combine a couple of events. So So the big party is going to be at Little America. It is free. It's a black tie optional dinner. We would love all of you to come. The only thing is, we only can fit 700 people in there. And we have more than 3,000 members. Some of those are big companies that have already reserved a couple tables of 10. So if you would like to come, you need to RSVP quickly. So you can do that. There's information on the invitation on how to RSVP, or you can stop by with me tonight and I'll put your name on the list, because we're probably passing about 300 people in there already sometime this week. So if you want to come to the big dinner, we would love to have you. Then let me start. We're going to launch right into this so that we can hopefully get done fairly quickly. But today we are going to be talking about the forms. Did everybody get the handouts in the front? Anybody missing them? Right up back there. If you want to share. We have two different handouts that are in the back of the room. The first one just lists all of the forms that we have in the association. So here's page 1 of it. Here's page 2. These are all of the forms that are available on the website. All right? They cover everything that we could think of, from animal identification form, that's for a service animal or a pet, lead pamphlet that the EPA requires, liability waiver if you happen to be renting out a place that has a pool or a trampoline. We have washer and dryer lease addendum, which is something that I had not looked at actually until this week. We have forms which cover virtually every contingency which we could think of. All right. I wanted to go over a couple of those forms tonight, and then if you have any questions about any other forms that I don't go over, please feel free to ask them. All right. The first form that I would like to go over is the lease. And I actually have a copy back here, so let me grab it. This is probably the rental application, the first one I want to go over. This is one of our most popular forms. This is also one of our forms that changes most frequently. Because if we ever find anything that's better than our application, we incorporate whatever is better into it, so we make sure we have the best ever. The application has several protections for you. The biggest one that's built in is when they sign the application, they give you permission to do a background check. So you now have permission to do a criminal check, to verify their employment, to do a credit check, to call their last landlords, everything built in right there, okay? The other thing that's good for this is this form contains all of their personal information, everything you need in order to go after them to get money. So if they skip out and cheat you on something, or they don't complete the lease, you have all this information. You have their social security, their birth date, all of that you need to go after them. Quick question, how long should you keep this form? I hear a few people say forever.
After they move out, you mean?
Yeah, so let's say there's two versions of this. If you deny their application, how long should you keep it?
3 years.
3 years. That's a statute of limitation on discrimination. So they can't come back after you after that and say you discriminated against me, you didn't rent to me for some illegal reason. So you can dispose of it at that. I had a landlord in Ogden tell me what they do is when they deny somebody, they write on the back why and file it away. And then if somebody has a problem, they can just reach through, pull out, and go, why did I deny them? You look on the back and you go, oh, that's why. Okay? And so then you have that protection for yourself. Now, when they do rent from you, how long should you keep it? As long as they owe you any money. As long as they owe you a cent, you keep this. Once you are completely settled up, you've sent them their deposit, and there's no chance that they're ever going to owe you money unless they come back and rent from you again, then you can get rid of it. Okay? All right, that makes sense. Any questions about the application form? These are pretty common. This is one that we do not offer in duplicate, but you can get that off the website and print it off as many as you like. And if you would like some, you can pick them up here. Yes, sir?
I wouldn't rush to dispose of it once they don't owe you money, because they may come and rent from you again in 3 or 4 years. And it's nice to look back and go, wait a minute, something fundamental here changed. That doesn't make any sense.
Right, right.
So I actually hold on to mine indefinitely.
Right, and you certainly can do that. And storing them in a file cabinet, that's great, as long as you have a lock on it, because it is personal information. You can scan this and put it onto your computer, as long as you have password protection on it. That's great. And then you can store it indefinitely, and you have it nice and safe. But yeah, you don't have to rush to get rid of it.
You can also, for the sake of privacy and keeping people's stuff, once you've scanned it, it should hopefully be more secure electronically. You can black out the Social Security because you won't need it on the paper form again. You've got it scanned onto your computer, and if you've done your background check, you've always got that available electronically from the background check.
Yes, Western Reporting, if you do if you do a background check, you can always go back and get those electronically. They back those up and they have them available for you.
Because some folks are sensitive about their information, and it's good for us to be good stewards of that.
Yes, it is, and because if we mess up often enough, the legislature is going to come down hard on us, and then you're going to have to comply and prove that you're being good. So be good so you don't get in trouble, and then have to be good. Any other questions or comments about the application? Yes, ma'am.
If you have a family, husband and wife, 3 children, and one of them's 18, do you have that 18-year-old sign that lease?
So the question is, would you have an 18-year-old sign a lease if it's a husband and wife?
Yes.
I would. You don't absolutely have to, but I would. Certainly if they're over 20, I would require it. But if they're 18, it's up to you. But they do fill out an application. Okay, so signing a lease is optional, but filling out an application, if they are 18, you want to check, because once they're 18, their records are going to open up and you want to check and see if they have a criminal past. Credit history for an 18-year-old, I don't know of any that are going to have a great credit, and it's not going to really matter if mom and dad are paying for the place anyway. But if they have a criminal record, you want to know about it. Yes, sir.
But also, if the parents were to move out, that 18-year-old is a leaseholder, so.
Yeah,
So
and he's
you want to put
legally
everybody
liable.
18 and over on the lease, do a background.
Yeah.
I charge them, if they're a day over 18, they pay the cost of the background check. And then you're covered everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. That way you don't have to set another hard date as well. If you say 18, that's it. Otherwise, you have to have and then you open yourself up to problems as well. If you're like, well, I let that 20-year-old in, but I didn't let this 20-year-old, I had made them do an application, then you might be asked, well, why? And that could be a problem. So set a hard and fast policy. There was another comment. Yes, sir.
I just, I had somebody that wasn't 18, but 25 or something. I just asked for his parents' personal guarantee.
Right. That's perfectly appropriate to turn it around and get a cosigner.
No problem.
Yeah.
So she came to my office, his mother, and signed it.
Yeah, yeah. It's perfectly appropriate to get cosigners the other way around when they are young. And
I
they
didn't
need
feel bad about him or anything. I just thought I'd ask, and I got it. So now I ask her.
Yeah, it's a great thing to do, to at least try when appropriate. I was actually at a conference down at BYU today talking to landlords down there, and there's a large apartment complex that requires all of their students to have a cosigner, no matter what.
So
That's
in
just
this
their
case,
policy.
you require cosigner background check as well?
Yes, you do a credit check on the cosigner.
Yeah.
Because they're not living there, you're also concerned about
the
their
cosigner is a tenant.
Yeah, the cosigner has the same financial obligations as a tenant.
If you're going to do that type of thing, though, you want to have a steady policy so that you never discriminate against somebody. Because if you take a cosigner for one person and you said you didn't have a reason, but then you don't for somebody else, and that one person was a protected class, you just opened yourself to a lawsuit.
Right, you want to have a consistent policy. You can request a cosigner if their credit is bad or something like that, and then you just have a consistent policy about why you would request a cosigner. Or you just do it to everybody, whatever your policies are. I want to move on really quick to the lease. We call it the Uniform Residential Rental Agreement. That's lawyer talk. Lawyers are fun, aren't they? Lawyers are the reason why this thing is so full of small type. I know that's a complaint among some landlords, by the way. The reason it's so small is because we want to fit it on this size of paper and our printer won't give us a big, huge one. So it all fits on this. If you want a larger version, you can print it off of the website and it will come out slightly larger, but this is what we have for the carbon copy version, all right? The lease is important because we update it regularly, okay? We go through at least once a year, we review it with lawyers, we see what's changed in the laws, we see what's changed in the court procedures, and we see what's changed in best practices, not only in Utah, but across the country. and we incorporate all of those best practices and all of those changes into our lease at least once a year, if there are any changes. You can always check and see the date of any of our forms. Will be down on the bottom right corner, by the way. All right. Now, what happens if you are using an old version of the lease? What should you do? Yeah, you're not completely up to date. Now, you're still under the protections of the old lease, but I would highly recommend that when it's time to renew with your tenant, you have them sign the newest and the most updated version of the lease. You just sign this, it supersedes the old version, and now you're good to go with all the additional protections for you and frankly for the tenant that are built into this. So we have all of those. Any questions about the lease or any lease provisions that anybody has any comments about? Yeah,
What are the latest lease revisions? What's the revision number on the latest lease?
So the latest version we have is actually from last January. We did not change it. We haven't changed it since then. We'll be reviewing it soon, though, to see if there are any changes.
There's a November change.
Oh, there is a November change? Okay, so the next edition that we printed out will be coming out. I did not know that. That's good to know. Yes, sir.
We've been told that you hand the lease to the tenant, prospective tenant, say, read it, rather than going down and explaining each and every
Right.
paragraph.
Right. If you sit there and read it with them, it's going to take you 3 hours.
But you're not liable.
Yeah,
as much as
if they sign it, even if they only glance at it, they're legally required to live up to it. Okay. Personally, I would not just read it with them, but I also would not just hand it to them. I would go over each of the clauses and just, this says this. Sorry, I have allergies. One second. Get some water. Yeah. It's that time of year. Ooh. So, yes.
I have a question. How is the Kurt Colemore's lease different from UAA's?
Great question. Cullimore usually writes our lease.
Yeah, I know that.
His has a couple more aggressive, oh boy, has a couple more aggressive clauses that he uses. He puts those in there because he's comfortable using it. And so if you have Cullimore as an attorney, or if you have another attorney that writes a lease for you, that's fantastic. And if they write a more aggressive lease, that's great because they're going to take you with them into court. They're going to take you for that. This is a more generalized lease. It's designed for people who don't want to use an attorney right necessarily, or who don't want to go to the edge of the law and do something that might or might not be backed up, and they might not get an attorney who's going to protect them in that. But the Cullimore lease.
I was always under the impression that judges were more likely to be familiar with the apartment association lease, therefore,
Yeah, that's a fantastic
decision if that's used.
This is the most commonly used lease in the state.
If it's changed every year, though, the judges, they're not acquainted with it anyway.
It's changed when the law changes.
It's changed when the law changes, so the judge knows the law changed anyway, yeah.
So, and different judges have different personalities, so you can take the same case in front of 5 judges, and as unfair as it seems, you could get slightly different verdicts. So that's why that's what the lawyer's role is, to go and argue your case. But you've got to have a judge who's leans a little more towards landlords, or one who leans a little more towards tenants.
If
And
Cullimore's is more aggressive, what has been the experience of judges with the Cullimore lease?
I don't know. You'd have to ask their office, because I don't really have a lot of knowledge about that. But I can say this, about 90% of it is exactly the same, or perhaps up to 95% of it is exactly the same. And there may just be a couple of little clauses in there that he's built in to be slightly more aggressive in the law. Things that he's comfortable with. If he has to take it all the way to the state Supreme Court, he will.
And I think maybe more important than that, because I'm a long-term member of the Apartment Association and of the Cullimore Law Group. And I come to Apartment Association training, and I go to Cullimore Law Group as training. The most important thing we can do is learn the laws ourselves from that training and apply them evenly and well and practice good business principles to prevent a problem. That's the single most important thing, more than, I mean, everything that's in here is important, but in the end, the law is going to be what's written in there. And then if the law changes, it'll strike down. Like if you have an old version and the law's changed, the law will supersede that written lease.
Right.
But otherwise, you want to have it in the lease, you want to have no oral agreements. That's the one part I always show tenants is, and there's a couple things I like to point out, but the one is that your written lease is the agreement you're signing. And in this lease is everything we can think of under the law. And you're bound by this written lease, and there are no written agreements. So, and that's in the lease. It's in both the
Right.
apartment association and the Cullimore lease. And then I do everything I can to do it right to prevent a problem.
Right.
And so you can use either. I don't think there's like he says, both are written by Cullimore, and the reason is Cullimore is involved in. He goes to court every day for this, and both Cullimore and the Apartment Association are involved in tweaking the laws and working on it. Paul is constantly working with the legislature on the laws. And so either way, you're in good shape.
Yep.
Just because it's written in the lease doesn't mean it holds up. We got involved in a big situation in Ogden. A thorough lease that covered everything in the Constitution down to your whatever, got into court. The judge said, has this lease been through court yet? He said, no. He says, case dismissed. He says, you'll probably win by appealing it, but not in my court until it's all approved, every line, regardless of
Whose lease were you using?
Pardon?
Whose lease were you using? If you used the apartment,
It was a lease written by an individual, a very top law firm.
Right, so if you use the apartment association or the Cullimore
Oh, yeah.
lease, those are well known in the courts.
No argument about that, but like I said, you have your lawyer write it up, you better be careful.
Yeah, you have to be careful.
And won't hold up.
Ours has stood the test of time.
Yeah.
Why we tweak it and we ensure that it's correct all the time. Most of it stays the same time after time, and if there are any updates, the judges will come to know them. And so it's a very familiar lease in the court system. I want to move on really quickly to the third form I wanted to talk about tonight, which is the move-in, move-out form. This is one of our most popular forms. And this is a fun one because we don't need a lawyer's permission to change it. It's not a legal document. This is just an opportunity for you and the tenant to go through the apartment and to specify what the condition is when they move in. And then in turn, when they move out, to specify what it's like when they move out. And then you compare the two and you say, hey, the counter was in perfect condition when you moved in. It was beat up really bad when you moved out. We're charging you for it. Okay? The key to this form is not being afraid to spill ink all over it. Fill it out as thoroughly as you can on both sides, and it will help you stand up in court if you ever comes to that. But it also helps the tenant. They realize, oh, yeah, okay, now I remember when I moved in 3 years ago. It's written there, and then, yeah, okay, I understand that now. So, any questions about this form?
Take photographs with it.
Photographs. That's
Wow.
fantastic. There are apps you can download that will help you do. I saw somebody today who she's pregnant and she couldn't make it up the stairs. And so she is a property manager. She gave her daughter the app, the thing, and said, go check your brother's room with this thing. And she just did what it told her, scanned around, and she looked at the picture, and he cleaned the room, and he took a picture, and it was all perfectly clean right here. The floor was a complete mess. And the daughter did exactly what the app said, and she was able to see that the floor was completely, totally messy, and say, hey, you can't go play until that's fixed. There was a comment back there.
Just a comment. You want to walk through with them and fill it out yourself. You let them have the form and let them fill it out, and you're going to have, there's a spot on the window.
Right.
What wasn't clean.
Yeah. Don't hand it over to them. You go through with them, and they point out things.
Yeah, I actually give it to them, so I do it the other way. And I say, we've got as long as you like. I take some blue painter's tape, and I say, you put a piece of tape next to every item that you think you want on this form. I don't care if you put down 3 things or 300. And they put whatever they want, we take a picture of everything. And then I've got a picture of every square inch of my place and move in. They cannot get a thing past me and move out. There's a picture of everything. And the more things they put on the form, the less they can fight with you and move out, because they've listed 83 things. You're like, let's see, amongst these 83 things, this hole in the wall was not here. It's one-sided, case closed, done.
Yeah, that works very well too.
And it takes a while, admittedly, but
And not only do you want to list everything that's wrong when you do the move-in side of it, you want to list anything that's unique, special, any antiques, or anything that's a custom-made order or something like that. You want to list it in there so that you know, oh, I need to double check on that thing.
and
Where's
in
that?
some cases, I'll photograph every wall, every surface, and we'll just take a photograph, north-facing wall, good. Nothing wrong with it. I have a picture of it and a note that it's good.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is documented. It makes them comfortable, and it makes it watertight for you on the back end.
Exactly. Any other comments on this section before we move on? No, let's go to the less happy notices. These last three are the ones you're going to use with every tenant, good, bad, ugly, no matter who they are. You're going to have them apply, give them a lease, and when they move in and move out. This is one that you hopefully don't have to use very often, and this is the 3-day termination notices, or the eviction notices. Who's done an eviction in the last 2 months? 2 of you, yeah. I'm actually, 3. Okay, yeah, as you say, in a group this size, I expected about 4. So, what was your experience?
Actually, I would qualify my answer. I've used the 3-day notice in the last several months.
Okay, well, that's good.
But the 3-day notice frequently does the job.
Right.
They then pay their rent, and I don't have to go any further on an eviction.
Isn't that great? You scared them, and are they going to pay late again? Hopefully not. You know,
I use it often.
Yeah, oh yeah, use it right on the first offense. You teach people how to treat you, and if you get off on them when they treat you bad by paying the rent late, they're going to stop doing it. They're not going to do it again, at least hopefully. So good, good. Anybody else want to share their experience in the last month that's evicted? Anything? All right, well, I want to just put a couple of things in your mind about this form. First, it's a great form, but it's written by lawyers. So it's a little complicated. You do not need to have a notary. You don't need to have anybody else deliver it for you, but you do have to sign it 3 times. You have to wear 3 different hats. One is the owner, one is the person serving the notice, and one is the person kind of witnessing that the notice is served. I know it's weird, but sign it 3 times. The other thing I wanted to bring up about this form, there are 4 little spots here for your name, address, city, state, zip